She was a powerful CEO, until the day her twin daughters ran to a janitor in panic and whispered, "Mom's dying." What happened next would reveal a past no one saw coming, and a skill no one expected. If stories of quiet heroism, healing, and second chances speak to your heart, we invite you to subscribe to Soul Moment Story, where every tale reminds us that even in silence, courage speaks loudest. Now let me take you back to where it all began, on the silent floor of a glass tower. The 37th floor of Stellar Tower was so quiet, it felt like time had stopped. The evening sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, tinting the marble corridor with a warm amber glow. The office lights had dimmed for the day. Secretaries had gone home, meetings had ended, and only the hum of the AC whispered across the glass halls like a lullaby for the powerful. Ethan Stone moved like a shadow. Dressed in a faded gray maintenance uniform, he pushed a mop slowly across the pristine hallway. His boots barely made a sound. His name tag, E. Stone, was worn, and his shoulders carried a weariness that didn't match the rhythm of his work. This wasn't exhaustion from the job. It was the kind that came from years of carrying something far heavier than buckets and rags. To the executives who passed him each morning, Ethan was invisible. The janitor, the guy with the keycard who emptied trash and made floors shine. They never saw the faint scar under his right ear, or the way he scanned every exit without even turning his head. They didn't notice how he could tell who was nervous just by the way their heels clicked against the tile. That kind of perception didn't come from cleaning offices. It came from war. Ethan had once been a combat medic in a special reconnaissance unit, the kind of soldier who went in quiet and came out quieter. He'd seen more loss than most people could process in a lifetime. And after everything fell apart, the battlefield, his marriage, the headlines, he didn't want attention. He wanted silence, and silence is what he found. Until tonight. A scream shattered the corridor. It was sharp, young, terrified. Ethan froze. The sound came from the corner office, the CEO's suite, a place he passed daily without a second glance. But tonight, something was different. He dropped the mop without realizing it, and moved toward the sound booths no longer silent. Mind clicking into a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. The double doors were cracked open. Inside, warm light spilled across the mahogany desk. Papers were strewn on the ground. A glass vase lay shattered beside the couch pedals scattered like blood splatter. And there, rushing out of the office, came two small figures. Twin girls, no older than 7. One clutched a pink stuffed rabbit. The other had a streak of red on her sleeve. He hoped it was paint. "Help," the taller one cried, her voice trembling. "They hurt Mom. She's dying." Ethan's body moved before his mind did. He knelt and steadied the girl's shoulders with practiced calm. "You're safe," he said gently. "Where is she?" The girl pointed with a shaky hand. "Inside. They're hurting her." Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped through the doors. What he saw in the next few seconds would haunt him forever, though not because of the violence. He'd seen worse. Much worse. It was the familiarity of it that hit him. The chaos. The helplessness. Inside the CEO's office, Tessa Hart, the young tech magnate whose face adorned magazine covers, was on the floor, one hand clutching her side, the other reaching weakly toward the door. Around her stood 4 men, well-dressed, clean-cut, and wrong. Everything about them screamed professional muscle, not corporate security. Ethan's voice dropped an octave. "That's enough." 4 heads turned. The closest one laughed. "Buzz off, janitor. This ain't your floor." Ethan took one slow step forward. His eyes locked onto the man's stance center of gravity. Draw speed. Another step, calculating the odds. The reach, the layout. No weapons visible, but the bulge under the blazer said otherwise. Still, No one expected what happened next. In a flash, Ethan moved. His elbow drove into the first man's jaw clean and fast. The second came at him with a swing that met nothing but air. Ethan pivoted, seized the attacker's wrist, and twisted until the crack of bone echoed like a gunshot. The third tried to tackle him. Ethan grabbed a fallen floor lamp and slammed it across the man's back. The last reached inside his coat, but it was too late. Ethan had already closed the distance. A swift jab to the solar plexus, a leg sweep, and the man hit the floor gasping. Silence returned, but this time it was thick with awe. Ethan knelt beside Tessa. Her face was pale, a trail of blood near her temple. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, checking her pulse with a gentle touch that belied his strength. She blinked slowly. "You're the janitor." "Not tonight," he said, lifting her into his arms. She grimaced, but didn't resist. For a moment, her head leaned against his chest, then darkness took her. Outside, the twins stood frozen. Ethan looked at them, his voice steady. "We're leaving." "Now." He glanced once more at the men on the floor. None were in any shape to follow. In the far end of the hallway, a security camera blinked red. Ethan stared at it for 1 second too long, just enough for the man watching on the other end to whisper into a phone. "We have a problem. He's awake." The elevator hummed softly as it descended its digital screen, flickering between floors. Ethan kept his back against the mirrored wall, holding Tessa Hart in his arms. Her pulse was weak but steady. A thin line of blood trailed from her temple down to her jaw, glistening in the dull elevator light. The two girls, Emma and Sophie, stood pressed against his side, clutching each other. They hadn't spoken since he told them to stay quiet. Their big blue eyes darted from their mother to the control panel, to the man carrying her to the doors that refused to open fast enough. The digital numbers glowed red. 36. 35. 34. Ethan listened. Beyond the mechanical hum, he could hear chaos above them, shouting footsteps, the faint static of radios. Whoever sent those men hadn't expected him, but now they knew, and they would not stop. He tightened his grip on Tessa as the elevator reached the lobby. "Stay behind me," he whispered to the girls. The door slid open with a chime. The lobby of Stellar Tower, normally polished and sterile, was half-dark security lights flickering. The guards at the reception desk were gone. Only a single guard lay slumped over a computer monitor, unconscious, or worse. Ethan's jaw tensed. This was planned. He moved quickly across the marble floor, every step measured. The twins followed, clutching hands. The air smelled faintly of ozone, the scent that came after gunfire. Outside, through the glass doors, he saw headlights. A black SUV idled at the curb. Inside, two silhouettes. "Keep your heads down," Ethan murmured. He moved toward the side corridor, the one marked, "Maintenance Access Only." No one ever looked twice at it. His keycard still worked. The green light blinked, the door opened, and he led the children into the narrow service hallway. For the first time, Emma spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you a soldier?" Ethan glanced down at her. "Used to be." She nodded like she somehow already knew. "Mom said good soldiers never die. They just go quiet." He almost smiled. "Your mom's smart." Sophie tugged his sleeve. "Will she be okay?" Ethan didn't answer right away. "I'll make sure she is." They moved through the dim hallway past pipes and humming vents. Tessa stirred in his arms, groaning softly. Her lashes fluttered open, and her first sight was his face, calm, alert, framed by the dull glow of an emergency light. Where are we?" she murmured. "Maintenance corridor," he said. "We're getting you out." She winced, trying to sit up. "You shouldn't have interfered. They'll come after you now." "I've had worse people come after me," he replied evenly. "You're lucky I was there." She looked at him more closely this time, beyond the uniform, beyond the janitor's name tag. There was something in his eyes, not just bravery, control, experience, the kind that comes from surviving things others can't imagine. "You were military," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Medic. Ranger unit." "Army?" she asked. He nodded. "Once upon a time." Before she could say more, he stopped. They had reached a dead-end wall of steel with a panel on the right. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small magnetic key, something no janitor should have had, and pried the panel open. Inside was a narrow passage between the walls of the building, barely wide enough for one person at a time. He turned to her. "This leads to the underground parking. No cameras, no alarms." Tessa blinked, surprised. "You built this?" He smirked faintly. "Fixed it enough times to know how to use it." He helped her step through first, then the twins, then closed the panel behind them. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the soft light of his small tactical flashlight, another thing that didn't belong on a janitor's belt. As they crawled through the narrow passage, Tessa's breathing grew heavier. Ethan adjusted her weight, murmuring, "Just a bit farther." "You can rest soon." Minutes stretched. Finally, a faint light appeared ahead. They emerged into the dim concrete of the underground garage. The air was cool, smelling of gasoline and rain. Tessa sank to her knees, exhausted. Ethan checked her pulse again, still steady. He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it gently to her wound. His hands were firm, but careful, practiced. "You need stitches," he said softly. She gave a dry laugh. "Add it to my calendar." Ethan allowed himself a thin smile. The twins clung to their mother, relief flooding their faces. For a brief moment, it almost looked normal, a family caught in an unexpected night. But the sound of screeching tires above shattered that illusion. "They found the trail," Ethan muttered. Tessa looked up, panicked. "They'll be watching every exit, not the one I use." He guided them toward the far corner of the garage behind a row of old pipes. There, hidden under a tarp, was a maintenance van, rusted unmarked with faded company letters. Ethan ripped the tarp off, tossed the mop and bucket aside, and opened the passenger door. Sophie climbed in first, then Emma, then Tessa with his help. Ethan jumped into the driver's seat, started the engine and killed the headlights. The van rolled out in near silence, gliding toward the secondary exit, one used only for staff deliveries. As they reached the ramp, a guard stepped into the beam of his nightstick. "Hey, that's not Ethan?" Didn't let him finish. He revved, once flashed his badge from the windshield, and the guard stepped back just long enough for the van to pass. Then they were out, swallowed by the night. For several minutes, none of them spoke. City lights reflected off wet asphalt as they sped toward the outskirts. Rain began to fall soft at first, then heavier, masking the sound of pursuit. Finally, Tessa broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "Because your girls ran to me. And when a child asks for help," he exhaled, "you don't turn away." Tessa studied him in the dim light of the dashboard. "You could have walked away." "I tried that once," he said, quietly. "Didn't work out." Something in his tone silenced her. There was a story there, a wound as deep as hers, but he didn't offer it, and she didn't ask. The rain intensified. Ethan pulled the van off the main road, steering toward an industrial area. "We'll hide the van and switch vehicles before dawn." "Do you have a plan?" she asked. He gave a slight grin. "Always." In the back seat, Emma had fallen asleep on her sister's shoulder. The soft rhythm of their breathing filled the van, fragile but peaceful. Tessa glanced at them, then back at Ethan. For the first time that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safety. When they stopped beneath an old bridge, Ethan shut off the engine. The city lights were distant now, just a faint glow on the horizon. He leaned back, listening. Nothing but the rain, and the faint crackle of thunder. Tessa turned to him. "What are you really?" Ethan's gaze stayed on the windshield. Someone who's done things he's not proud of, and tries to make it right, one good deed at a time. Lightning flashed across his face, revealing the faint tattoo at the edge of his collar, a winged serpent coiled around a cross. She recognized it instantly. "You were Delta Force," she whispered. He didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep, steady, inevitable. Inside the van, for the first time since the chaos began, the twins slept peacefully. And Tessa Hart, CEO of Stellar Industries, realized something profound. The man who once mopped her floors might be the only person left who could keep them alive. The night wrapped around the van like a velvet curtain, as Ethan rolled slowly through the narrow service alley behind the abandoned freight terminal. The engine purred, low headlights off. Mist clung to the windshield. Far above, the city glimmered like a distant world. In the rearview mirror, the twin girls were asleep, Emma's small hand resting gently on Sophie's wrist. Tessa sat between them, her head tilted back, eyes closed, but Ethan knew she wasn't asleep. Her breathing was too controlled. She was calculating, thinking 10 moves ahead, like anyone who'd survived corporate warfare long enough to wear a CEO badge before age 35. Ethan turned the van down a side ramp into a loading bay that had once served as a military warehouse. Now it was condemned, its ownership tied up in red tape and bankruptcy court. In other words, perfect. He killed the engine. "We're here," he said softly. Tessa opened her eyes, blinking away the remnants of adrenaline and pain. "Where exactly?" "Is here somewhere. No one remembers," Ethan replied. He stepped out first, then opened the side door and lifted Emma into his arms without waking her. The girl stirred just enough to snuggle into his shoulder. Sophie followed, groggy but silent, holding Tessa's hand. The three of them stood under the dim sodium lights of the terminal's entrance, faces pale, clothes smudged with soot, and blood hair damp from the drizzle. Ethan led them toward a rusted metal door, concealed behind a false panel in the wall. He tapped a sequence on the rusted keypad, an old habit from another life, and the door clicked open. Beyond it stretched a corridor no one but a handful of men had ever used. The walls were concrete, the floor slightly sloped for drainage. Overhead, a row of flickering lights hummed like flies in a jar. The air smelled of rust and damp earth. But to Ethan, it smelled like safety. Tessa paused at the threshold. "Is this a tunnel?" "It's a ghost corridor," Ethan said. "Built back in the Cold War days for quick evac, if the government facility above ever went hot. I found it during an ops run in '08. Been patching it ever since." She arched a brow, while Ethan glanced back at her. Some places are worth keeping off the map. She followed without another word. The deeper they walked, the quieter the world became. Every footstep echoed. Every breath seemed louder. The girls remained close, Emma still cradled in Ethan's arms, Sophie holding tightly to her mother's jacket. Tessa finally broke the silence. "They were going to kill me," she said flatly, as if testing the words aloud. "In my own office, in front of my daughters." Ethan nodded. They weren't amateurs. Clean organized. Paid to scare, not ask questions. "Silas Knox," she said with ice in her voice. "He sent them." "I know it." Ethan said nothing, but the name etched itself into his memory like a scar. Tessa glanced at him. "You know who he is, I do now. He's been after my company for years. I refused a merger. He offered 3 times our value. I still said no. It wasn't about money." "It never is," Ethan muttered. She looked down. "When I declined, he started the smear campaign, insider leaks, false audits, rumors of embezzlement. I stayed quiet. Then came the blackmail. And finally," she swallowed, "tonight." Ethan reached a junction in the tunnel and turned sharply left. The corridor narrowed before opening into a small room, lit by a single hanging bulb. Inside was a worn cot, a desk covered in maps, and a filing cabinet so old it looked welded shut. "Safe house," he said simply. Not glamorous, but dry and off-grid. He gently laid Emma on the cot. Sophie climbed beside her and curled up instantly. Exhaustion heavier than fear now. Tessa stood silently by the doorway. For a moment she didn't speak, just watched Ethan as he moved through the room with quiet confidence. He poured water from a jug into a bowl, dipped a cloth, and returned to her with the same tenderness he'd shown her daughter. She winced as he dabbed at the dried blood on her temple. "You've done this before," she murmured. "Too many times," he said. "Do you still remember their names?" she asked suddenly. Ethan froze for just a breath. Every one of them. Their eyes met his, guarded hers, open in raw vulnerability. In that moment, no boardroom walls or combat zones separated them. Just two people who'd seen the worst the world had to offer, and chose to survive it anyway. She sat down slowly beside her girls, watching them breathe in sleep. "You have a daughter too, don't you, Samantha?" he replied. 9. Tessa offered a soft smile. "Where is she?" "At home. Safe." His voice dropped. "She lost her mom 3 years ago. I wasn't going to let 2 more girls go through that tonight." Tessa looked away, emotion tightening her throat. "You didn't have to help us." "I know." She glanced back at him. "So why did you?" He was quiet for a long beat before answering. "Because I was invisible. And sometimes the invisible ones, they see what others miss. I saw 3 people trying not to die, and that's something I couldn't ignore." Tessa exhaled slowly, the weight of the past few hours catching up all at once. Outside, the rain picked up again, tapping faintly against the rusted ductwork, like a clock ticking on borrowed time. Ethan checked his watch. "We have maybe 6 hours before they triangulate. We move before dawn. Where will we go? Somewhere with fewer questions," he said. "And better coffee." Tessa gave a weak laugh. Ethan looked at her once more, and this time his voice softened. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." She hesitated, then nodded, easing herself down beside her daughters. The hard floor and concrete walls offered no comfort, but the presence of the man across the room, standing silent near the door, was somehow enough. As her eyes began to close, Tessa Hart whispered one last thought into the dim. "You don't seem like a janitor." Ethan didn't turn around. "That's the point." Then the light bulb flickered again, and the world fell back into silence. The sun hadn't yet risen, but the sky was beginning to pale just enough to draw a soft silver line along the horizon. Mist clung to the trees as Ethan's van rolled down the gravel road, its tires crunching through fallen pine needles. The city had long disappeared behind them, replaced by quiet fields, long shadows, and the kind of silence that lives only in the outskirts. Tessa stirred in the passenger seat, her head resting lightly against the window. Her blazer was draped over the sleeping twins in the back seat, their cheeks still smudged with smoke and dried tears. They hadn't woken once since the safe house, not even during the switch to Ethan's personal vehicle, a beat-up forest green Chevy Suburban with Army decals scratched off but not forgotten. Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. He hadn't been here in almost a year. The house sat at the edge of town, tucked behind an old chain-link gate, barely visible through the thicket of pines. Weather had softened its edges, ivy had crept over the fence, rust kissed the mailbox, and the porch swing tilted ever so slightly to the right, as if bowing to time. But inside, the place still carried warmth. Ethan parked without a word and stepped out, stretching his legs for the first time in hours. He opened the back door, gently lifting Emma in his arms. Tessa picked up Sophie, her movements cautious, deliberate. Together they moved toward the porch, under the soft light of early dawn. The front door opened before they reached it. A girl with chestnut curls and a too-big hoodie stood barefoot in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad?" she asked, voice groggy. "It's not Saturday." Ethan smiled gently. "I know, sweetheart. We've got company." Samantha Stone blinked once, then looked past him at the women and children. Tessa froze. Something about the way the little girl stood calm, curious, barefoot on a wooden floor, she clearly owned with confidence, unlocked something in her. This was a child who had lost much, but carried herself like someone raised with love and discipline. "Friends?" Samantha asked. Ethan nodded. "They need our help." Samantha stepped aside without another word. Inside the house was smaller than Tessa expected, but not cramped. It was worn but clean, decorated with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books, coffee mugs, and hand-drawn pictures. A well-loved teddy bear sat on the arm of a faded couch. A framed photo on the mantel showed Ethan in uniform, holding a newborn wrapped in pink. The place smelled faintly of cedar coffee grounds, and something older, like pages of a well-read novel. Tessa lowered Sophie onto the couch, brushing the child's hair back with a tenderness only a mother could offer. Ethan set Emma beside her, then walked into the kitchen, flipping on a light that hummed and blinked before settling. "I'll make some food," he said over his shoulder. Samantha followed him, already pulling down plates from the cabinet like it was just another morning. Tessa remained standing, eyes trailing across the room. For the first time since the ordeal began, her posture softened, her adrenaline thinned, replaced by something far more fragile: gratitude. She watched Ethan move in the kitchen, efficient, steady, never wasting a gesture. He cracked eggs with one hand, flipped bacon without a word, poured coffee like a man who measured the day in sips and silences. "You live here alone?" she asked, still seated by her girls. Ethan nodded. "Just the two of us. Does she go to school online mostly?" I didn't want her getting dragged into the noise. She's smart. Ahead of her grade. Tessa smiled faintly. "She looks happy." "She is," Ethan said simply. Breakfast came in simple ceramic plates: eggs, toast, sliced apples. Nothing fancy. But the way the children devoured it in sleepy silence gave the moment a holiness Tessa hadn't expected. When Emma finished, she looked up at Ethan with wide eyes. "Do you have cartoons?" Samantha grinned. "We've got Looney Tunes, old ones, the good stuff." In moments, the three girls were nestled together on the couch beneath a wool blanket, watching a rabbit outsmart a hunter. Their laughter filled the room. Tessa sat across the table from Ethan, now both of them nursing coffee. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this." Ethan stared at his mug. "I didn't do it for thanks. I know she said. That's why it means more." A silence passed between them, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind that only people who've been through storms together could share. Tessa leaned back. "You know, I used to think I had control. Everything in a calendar, every pitch rehearsed, every risk calculated. But when they grabbed me in that office, when I heard Emma scream," her voice faltered. She looked away, blinking fast. Ethan didn't speak. She continued quieter. "All that control disappeared, and I realized I didn't know how to protect them. Not really. Not like you did." Ethan's jaw flexed. "I wasn't always like this. I learned the hard way. Lost good people. A lot of them." He looked at her for the first time with open honesty. "My wife died in a rollover while I was deployed. I came back 2 weeks late for her funeral because a mission went sideways. No one blamed me out loud, but they didn't have to." Tessa's hand tightened around her mug. "I blamed myself," Ethan finished. Another silence. Longer. Deeper. "Then that tattoo," she said. "The one on your collar. Delta Force." He nodded once. Tessa exhaled. Why work maintenance? Because people don't look at a janitor, he said. And sometimes I need to disappear. But even when you disappear, you still see. She nodded slowly. What did you see? When you looked at us, Ethan looked toward the couch where the girls were now giggling, wrapped up in cartoons and childhood. I saw something worth protecting. Outside, the sky turned pink. Inside, for the first time in days, Tessa Hart let herself exhale, not as a CEO, not as a survivor, but simply as a mother, grateful for the quiet. And across from her, Ethan Stone, the invisible man, watched the sunrise, not as a soldier or a shadow, but as a father, beginning to believe that maybe healing was possible. Night fell quietly over Ethan's house. The children had drifted to sleep hours ago. Emma curled into Sophie like two puzzle pieces. Samantha curled in the armchair, with a book still open across her chest. Ethan had tucked a blanket over her without waking her. Tessa stood alone by the window, arms folded, gazing out at the darkness beyond the pines. The porch light cast a soft halo over the front steps. Beyond that, only blackness. Ethan returned from the back room carrying a metal box, a weathered army ammo case reconditioned and locked. He set it down on the table with the quiet weight of memory. Tessa turned. What's in there? Ethan sat without answering. He unlocked the box, revealing its contents: a folded field map, a patch from a long disbanded unit, a pair of surgical gloves, an encrypted comms device, and a photograph. Tessa walked over and picked up the photo. A younger Ethan stood between two soldiers in a desert outpost, sand shadows, smiles forced through exhaustion. On his shoulder, a familiar face. Tessa's brows knit. That's Elliot, my father's old friend, our lawyer. He was our field medic before he passed the bar, Ethan said. He patched me up more than once. We stayed in touch after I left. Tessa placed the photo down, her expression unreadable. You've been keeping tabs on us. Ethan shook his head. No, just him. And only when the noise got loud enough to sound familiar. She sat across from him now, quiet, but watchful. The air between them had shifted since this morning, more trust, but also more tension, as if the stillness of the cabin couldn't hold back the truth any longer. Tell me about Silas Knox, Ethan said. Tessa's jaw tightened. She looked down at the table, then out the window again. My father built Stellar from nothing, she began. And not just the company, he built a reputation. Integrity, innovation, purpose. When he died, I took over. Youngest female CEO on the West Coast. The press made it sound glamorous. It wasn't. She paused. Silas was one of his earliest partners. Quiet investor. They used to play poker together. I remember him giving me a stuffed bear when I was 5. I used to call him Uncle Si. Ethan said nothing. He knew how corruption often started with affection. When I stepped in, he offered to increase his share. Said he wanted to help me shoulder the weight. I declined. He doubled the offer. I declined again. Tessa's voice dropped. 3 weeks later, an audit flagged my executive bonuses as excessive falsely. Then came the anonymous letters, suggesting I'd covered up insider trading. An old boyfriend I hadn't seen in years suddenly went to the media with stories about coercion. Lawsuits I'd never seen started appearing in my inbox. Investors got nervous. Journalists camped outside the office. Everything spiraled. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. I stayed quiet, thinking it would pass. It didn't. Then 2 days ago, I got a package with photos me my daughter's taken from long range. One note inside: merge, or bury them. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Not this time. Ethan's voice was steady. You should have gone to the police. I did, she said bitterly. The lieutenant was bought. He called Silas an upstanding patriot. They asked more questions about my mental health than the actual threat. Ethan's jaw tensed. Typical. Knox has the kind of reach money alone can't buy. Tessa met his gaze. So do you. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into the box and pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the table. I've been logging encrypted feeds off building cameras at Stellar for months, part of my unofficial exit protocol. Thought I was being paranoid. Turns out I wasn't paranoid enough. Tessa picked up the drive, then looked back at him. What's on it? Proof. Of planning, of their coordination inside your building. 2 guards on your payroll switched badges 2 days ago. I flagged them, but nothing pinged officially. Now I know why. Tessa leaned back, shoulders sagging. I thought I had control. No one has control. Not in the dark. You just hope you're holding the right flashlight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the creak of the trees outside and the steady ticking of the old wall clock. Then Ethan stood. "Come here," he said. Tessa hesitated, then followed him out to the porch. The air was crisp, laced with pine, and the faint smell of rain. Above them, the stars had broken through the clouds, cold, quiet watching. Ethan pointed into the darkness. "See that hill?" She nodded. "On the other side is the Everpine trailhead. There's an old cabin there. Belonged to my wife's father. Haven't used it in years, but it's remote defensible off-grid. We'll head there before dawn." Tessa looked at him, studying the set of his jaw, the steadiness in his voice, the way he kept scanning the tree line even as he spoke. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. Ethan took a breath. "Because the world's full of people who know how to hurt, and very few who still remember how to protect." He glanced at her. "And because your girls didn't scream for the police, they ran to a janitor. That says everything about who they trusted, and about who's failed them." Tessa looked down. "I never wanted them to see any of this. They haven't seen the worst," he said softly. "And they won't if we move right." She looked up. "What happens if we don't?" Ethan's eyes were distant, now focused not on the trees, but on memories far darker. "Then I make sure I'm the last one standing between them and what's coming." For a moment the silence returned, but this time it felt different. Not ominous, just still. Tessa stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You were more than a medic, weren't you?" Ethan nodded once. "I was a ghost." And now he looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding forged in crisis, but rooted in something deeper. Now he said, "I'm a father." And fathers fight. Behind them, the house remained quiet, lit only by a single lamp in the living room, where 3 little girls slept in peace. For now, the cabin emerged from the trees, like something forgotten by time. Nestled in a clearing deep within the Everpine woods, it was built from dark pine logs, moss-softened stone, and a wraparound porch that sagged in just the right places. It didn't look like a fortress. It looked like a memory. But to Ethan Stone, it was both. He parked the Suburban behind a thick curtain of firs hidden from view. The dirt road they'd followed had long vanished beneath fallen leaves and overgrown brush. No tire tracks, no satellites, no signals. Off-grid, exactly how he needed it. The early morning fog had just begun to lift. Sunlight spilled in dappled patches through the canopy above, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine needles. Samantha stepped out of the car first, stretching with a soft yawn. She looked at the cabin and smiled. "You cleaned it last summer," she said. Ethan nodded. "Didn't think I'd be back so soon." Tessa stepped out behind her arms, stiff from the long ride. She blinked at the cabin lips parted not in disapproval, but in awe. After years of glass towers and marble floors, the sight of something so real it creaked in the wind made her forget for a moment that someone had tried to kill her. Sophie and Emma trailed behind, sleepy and silent, still clutching the ends of their mother's sweater like safety ropes. Inside the cabin was cold but clean. Wood stove, one long dining table, a loft above for the kids, a single cot below, a stack of firewood, lanterns, board games, jars of dried herbs, and a first aid kit that looked military-issued. This place is... Tessa paused. You lived here for a while, Ethan replied. After everything. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Samantha led the girls upstairs. Within minutes, laughter echoed from the loft as the children discovered a box of old wooden toys, comic books, and handmade friendship bracelets left by a girl who used to live here full-time. Tessa stood by the window, hands in her pockets, watching Ethan as he stirred kindling into the stove. "Where's their mother?" she asked gently. Ethan didn't look up. Buried on the other side of the hill, next to her parents. Tessa lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." He nodded once and said nothing else. The cabin warmed quickly. By midday, the girls were running barefoot through the clearing, building fairy houses with sticks and stones. Samantha taught them how to skip rocks near the creek, and for the first time since the rooftop escape, the sound of giggling replaced the memory of screams. Tessa sat on the porch steps watching them. She sipped from a chipped ceramic mug Ethan had handed her coffee, strong and smoky. Her eyes trailed across the tree line. No movement. No threats. Just birdsong and rustling leaves. Ethan sat beside her, a knife in one hand, whittling a smooth piece of cedar. "They needed this," she said. "They all do," he replied. Tessa turned to him. "What about you?" He paused, knife mid-carve. "I'm not sure I know how to knead anymore." She studied him, the way his brow furrowed slightly when he focused, the way his hand, scarred and steady, moved with precision, even when idle. "You're good with kids," she said. "And people." "I'm good in short bursts," he said with a dry grin. She smiled, but it faded. "I used to believe I had to be the strong one, for everyone, at the company at home. Like if I let go for even a second, the whole machine would fall apart." Ethan looked at her. "And did it?" Tessa took a long sip before answering. "Not the machine. Just me." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the laughter echoing down from the creek. Then a low chime. Ethan's body snapped to attention. He stood quickly and pulled a device from his pocket, a small, screenless tracker, no bigger than a pager. One red dot blinked slowly in the center. "What is that?" Tessa asked, standing. "Silent perimeter breach," he said, already moving. He reached beneath the porch and unlocked a hidden weapons case. From it, he retrieved a scoped bolt-action rifle, slung it across his shoulder, and handed Tessa a small walkie-talkie. "Take the girls inside." Quietly. Tessa didn't argue. She turned and moved fast, but calm toward the creek. Ethan moved the opposite direction, vanishing into the tree line like smoke. 15 minutes later, he returned. No footsteps. Just a quiet knock on the back window to let her know it was safe. Tessa met him at the door, worry etched across her face. "What did you see?" Ethan unslung the rifle and placed it on the kitchen counter. "Nothing. No people. But someone tampered with the old motion sensor on the north ridge. Cut clean, not chewed. Wire snapped with precision. Could it be an animal?" He shook his head. "Too clean. Whoever it was knew what to avoid." Tessa's voice dropped. "They found us." "Not yet," he replied. "But they're looking. And they're close." Tessa exhaled sharply. "Then this place isn't safe. It's as safe as it gets for now," he said. "And I've got eyes on the ridges. We'll know before they get close again." She crossed her arms. "And if they come with drones, satellites, heat signatures," Ethan turned to her. "Then we stop running." The cabin fell into silence again, but not fear. Something different. Resolve. Tessa moved to the stairs to check on the girls, but paused, looking back at him. "You never told me what your tattoo meant." "The winged serpent." Ethan looked at her, and his voice was low even. "It's a reminder. The serpent is the enemy. The wings. That's hope." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Tessa nodded once, then turned to the stairs. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the evening wind, but somewhere beyond the clearing, someone was watching. And Ethan Stone, father ghost protector, knew this calm wouldn't last. But for tonight, they had firelight laughter and the fragile warmth of people beginning to believe in safety again. The cabin glowed in the dark, like a lantern in the woods. Inside, the children slept soundly in the loft, their limbs tangled in soft quilts and each other's warmth. Samantha had stayed up telling ghost stories, nothing scary, just silly enough to make the twins giggle until sleep claimed them. Downstairs, Tessa sat at the long wooden table, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a mug of mint tea in her hands. Ethan stood by the window, one eye pressed to the edge of the curtain, the other fixed on the tree line outside. The fire cracked softly. A vinyl record spun on a player in the corner, low and scratchy Moon River, almost too gentle for the weight of what loomed. Tessa broke the silence. "You know what scares me the most?" Ethan turned slightly but didn't answer. She continued. "It's not Silas, or the lawsuits, or even the bullets. It's the thought that after all this, my daughters won't remember the kind of woman I tried to be." He looked at her fully now. "They'll remember the woman who didn't back down," he said. Tessa gave a faint, sad smile. "You say that like you believe it." "I do." He paused, then added, "Because that's what they'll remember about you tonight. That you fought to protect them. That you didn't crumble." Tessa looked into her mug as if trying to believe that too. "Does Samantha remember her mom?" she asked softly. Ethan's voice was steady, bits and pieces, mostly smells. Her laugh, the way she said her name. He stared back out the window. "She doesn't remember the hospital, or the crash. I made sure of that." Tessa didn't speak again. She didn't have to. The fire dimmed. Outside, the trees swayed gently. Everything felt wrapped in cotton, quiet. Safe, soft. Then Ethan stiffened. He moved across the room without a word, grabbed the rifle from the wall, and killed the lights with a flick of his finger. Tessa stood instantly. "What is it?" Ethan's voice was low-controlled. "We're not alone." He crossed to the back door, cracked it open. The scent of smoke hit him first, not firewood. Gasoline. "Get the girls." "Now." Tessa didn't argue. She flew up the stairs as Ethan stepped out onto the porch. He scanned the shadows with precision. The wind had shifted. The smoke was moving toward the cabin, unnatural. Guided. He heard it before he saw it. Glass shattered. A flash. A whoosh. Then fire. A Molotov cocktail arced through the side window and exploded against the stone hearth, sending flames licking across the cabin's wooden beams. "Move!" Ethan bellowed. Tessa was already halfway down the stairs, with Sophie and Emma in her arms, Samantha just behind her. Smoke curled rapidly across the ceiling. The fire roared to life, angry, fast, too fast. "Back door," Ethan ordered. He shoved open the hidden panel beneath the stairs, revealing the storm shelter hatch. With practiced speed, he kicked it open, revealing a steep descent into darkness. "Go," he barked. Tessa dropped into the hole first. Then Samantha passed the girls down one by one. The last thing they heard before Ethan dropped in after them was the crackle of flames consuming memories. Below ground, the shelter was narrow, but navigable. Ethan grabbed a duffel from a hidden alcove, pre-packed water, flashlights, clothes ammo. The children coughed softly. Emma whimpered. Tessa cradled her. "Shh, it's okay. We're together." We're okay. They weren't, and everyone knew it. Ethan took point, leading them through the tunnel, an old escape route built by his father-in-law after the Vietnam War. No one had used it in decades, until now. The passage curved north, sloping upward. Ahead, moonlight. They emerged into the woods 100 yards uphill from the burning cabin. From there, they watched. Flames had consumed the front porch. A second Molotov burst in the kitchen, then headlights. Black SUVs pulled up in silence. Men stepped out dressed in tactical gear, not police uniforms. Silas's men. They were late. They thought Ethan and the children were inside. They didn't know about the tunnel. Ethan's hand gripped the rifle tighter. He could take 2, maybe 3, but not all of them. And the girls were here. That changed everything. Tessa's voice was tight behind him. Do we run? Ethan scanned the ridge. No. We vanish. He turned to Samantha. You remember the outpost? She nodded. The ranger station. South Trail. He handed her the flashlight. Lead them. Quiet. Don't stop. Tessa's eyes flared. You're not coming, I'll catch up. I need to make sure they don't follow. She grabbed his arm. Ethan, he looked at her not as a soldier, not even as a protector, but as a man who had already made peace with what he had to do. Trust me, he said. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. The old ranger station was 3 miles south. The trail was steep, half washed out, littered with roots. But Samantha moved like she'd done it 100 times, which she had. Tessa carried Sophie. Emma clung to Samantha's hand, her breath ragged. They didn't look back. Behind them, faint pops echoed in the night. Not fireworks. Gunfire. Tessa tightened her grip on Sophie and pushed forward. When they reached the station, half collapsed, long abandoned, Tessa almost fell to her knees. But there was no time. Ethan had shown her once a hidden basement beneath the floorboards. She kicked them in hard until the hatch gave way. They climbed in and waited. Dark. Dusty. Still. Then footsteps above. Tessa pulled the girls closer. Her heart thundered in her chest. She reached for the pistol Ethan had pressed into her hand just before vanishing. But the footsteps were slow. Deliberate. Familiar. A soft knock. Then, it's me. Ethan. He dropped into the crawlspace covered in ash and sweat, but whole. Emma launched into his arms. I thought you were gone. He hugged her close. Not yet, sweetheart. Not yet. Tessa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, the forest swallowed the flames. Inside the ranger station, surrounded by broken beams and fading echoes of violence, 5 people huddled together, safe for now. And Ethan Stone, the ghost no one remembered, looked into the dark and whispered, next time they won't miss. The forest didn't sleep. Wind pressed through the trees in long, mournful sighs. Branches groaned overhead. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called once then silence. Not even crickets dared to answer. Ethan adjusted the strap on his duffel and glanced back. Samantha walked just behind him, flashlight lowered to avoid giving away their path. Tessa followed, cradling Sophie in her arms, every step heavier than the last. Emma clung to her side, too tired to speak, too scared to cry. They had been walking for nearly 4 hours. The ranger station was long behind them, burned, compromised. The fire had drawn attention. If Silas's men weren't searching already, they would be by dawn. They had to keep moving. But the forest was no longer just wilderness, it was resistance. The air had dropped to near freezing. Moisture clung to their clothes, their skin. Every breath steamed white in the dark. The children had stopped laughing hours ago. Now there was only the sound of boots through leaves and the occasional soft cough from Emma. Ethan slowed his pace. The girl was shivering. Stop, he said. Tessa looked up. Her face was pale beneath the moonlight, strands of hair stuck to her cheeks with sweat. "She's burning up," she said softly. Ethan knelt beside Emma, unzipped his duffel, and pulled out a small thermal blanket. He wrapped it around her carefully, then felt her forehead. She was hot. Too hot. "Smoke inhalation," he muttered. "Probably started back at the cabin." "It's gotten worse." Tessa's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Ethan's voice remained calm, steady. "We treat it." He pulled out a small case, his old medic kit, the one he'd carried through combat zones and backwoods rescue missions. It wasn't high-tech, but it was enough. He laid Emma down gently on a bed of pine needles and worked fast, checking her breathing, monitoring her pulse, crushing a tablet into water, and coaxing her to sip it slowly. Her breathing was shallow but not labored. Yet. Tessa knelt beside him, hands shaking. "Is she going to be okay?" Ethan looked her in the eyes. "Not if we keep moving." He stood, scanned the tree line. "There's an old hunting shed about a mile from here. North Ridge. It's not much, but it's shelter. We get her there. We warm her up, and we wait." Tessa nodded, scooping Emma back into her arms. Ethan wrapped his jacket around them both. They moved again, slower, now tighter, each footstep a prayer. At last they reached it. The shed stood alone beneath a slope of rock, half covered in brush and shadow. A corrugated metal roof half collapsed. One door. No windows. Ethan forced it open with his shoulder and swept the interior quickly. Empty. Safe. He turned to the group. Inside. Now. The girls huddled together on a makeshift bed of old tarp and blankets. Ethan broke open a heat pack, placed it beneath Emma's blanket, then checked her breathing again. Still shallow, still hot. Samantha and Sophie were asleep within minutes, curled together like fox kits in a den. Tessa remained awake, watching Ethan from the corner as he crouched beside her daughter. "You don't panic," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "I can't afford to. How many times have you done this?" she asked. "Saved lives like this." He finally glanced at her. "Enough to know you can do everything right, and still lose them." Tessa drew closer, her voice barely audible. "What happens if we lose her?" Ethan's jaw tensed. He looked down at Emma, then back at Tessa. "I don't lose kids," he said. "Not anymore." He reached into the kit and pulled out a small vial. Natural bronchodilator. Plant-based. Old field trick. It'll help open her lungs. Tessa watched as he gently coaxed it into Emma's mouth. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of care. "You'd make a hell of a doctor," she whispered. "I tried that once," he said. "Didn't like the paperwork." That earned a faint smile from her. Minutes passed, then 20, then an hour. At last Emma stirred. She coughed wet but strong and blinked up at them. Mom Tessa's heart nearly burst. She leaned down, pressing her lips to Emma's forehead. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." Emma turned her head slowly. "Is the cabin gone?" "Yes," Tessa said softly. "But we're okay." Emma looked past her to Ethan. "You didn't let me die." He smiled, eyes soft. "Told you I wouldn't." She closed her eyes again, not from pain this time, but from peace. Tessa sat back, exhaling a breath she'd been holding for hours. Her hands were still shaking. Ethan moved beside her, sat down against the wall. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "Thank you." He didn't respond, just nodded. They sat in the dark, listening to the faint breathing of 3 sleeping children and the wind outside, pressing against the thin metal walls. It was far from safe, far from over. But for the first time in hours, the immediate threat had lifted. Tessa looked at him. "I don't understand how someone like you ended up invisible." Ethan stared ahead. "Sometimes it's the only way to stay useful." She shifted. But you're not invisible anymore." He met her gaze, then his eyes darker than usual. "No," he said quietly. "And that means we don't have much time." Outside, the wind howled louder, but inside, that shed a single promise burned brighter than the cold. He would not lose them. Not tonight. Not ever. The forest gave way to clearing just after sunrise. They moved slowly now. Exhaustion clung to every muscle. Samantha led the way with quiet determination, her hand scratched from pushing brush aside. Tessa carried Sophie on her hip, while Emma walked beside Ethan, wrapped in the oversized ranger jacket he'd found earlier. Her fever had broken, but her cheeks were still flushed, her voice a soft whisper whenever she asked how much farther. Almost there, Ethan told her again. The path curved uphill, veiled by fog, until at last the silhouette appeared tilted and overgrown, but unmistakable. The outpost. Once a forest ranger station, it now stood like a forgotten sentinel, its windows cracked, its antenna half collapsed, but still strong enough to offer something Ethan hadn't had in days' connection. He stepped up to the door, forced it open with a groan of splintering wood, and scanned the interior. Dust. Broken filing cabinets, rodent droppings in the corners, but the solar generator he'd rigged years ago still blinked green under the desk. "Hope." Inside, he said. "We hold here." Tessa set Sophie down gently beside the fireplace, while Ethan pried open a panel in the wall. Behind it, an emergency comms box, wrapped in foam and sealed with a rubber strap. He pulled it out with reverence, like a priest handling an old relic. Samantha stared. "You really kept all this?" But Ethan shrugged. "You never throw away lifelines." He flipped the unit on. A blue LED pulsed once, twice, then hummed to life. Ethan adjusted the dial, found a clear channel, and keyed the mic. "This is Echo 4-1 requesting secure contact with Echo 9 or 3. Repeat, Echo 4-1, broadcasting from grid Alpha 2-5. Come in, Elliot. Come in, Elliot." He released the button and waited. Static. Tessa stood behind him, eyes fixed on the radio like it might breathe. Then a click, followed by a low voice, calm but urgent. "Echo 9 or 3 online." That Stone Ethan closed his eyes in brief relief. "It's me. We're alive. All 5 of us. Jesus," Elliot whispered. "I've been chasing dead trails for 48 hours. They said you were gone. They were almost right." Tessa leaned in. "Elliot, it's me. They tried to kill us. My daughter saw everything." Elliot didn't hesitate. "I believe you. We're moving fast now. I've got a judge lined up for emergency protective custody. But you need to get to a safe extraction point." Ethan frowned. "They've burned the cabin, breached the North Line. That extraction would have to be miraculous." Pause. Then Elliot said something that made Ethan sit upright. "I've got a signal, Echo. They pinged the Stellar Tower grid trying to access your employee records, Tessa. They left a trail. It's traceable if we move. Now we can flip the whole board on Silas." Tessa's voice hardened. "What do you need from me?" "A statement. Right now. Recorded. Live. Something that will show this wasn't corporate sabotage. It was attempted murder. Of you, your daughters, and of a federal witness." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the window. "You don't think they'll trace this broadcast I'm bouncing through a dozen relays? You've got maybe 30 minutes before someone gets close." Tessa didn't blink. "Then let's make it count." Ethan set the recorder, handed her the mic. The air in the outpost turned electric. She cleared her throat once. "My name is Tessa Hart. I'm the CEO of Stellar Industries. 5 days ago, I refused a hostile acquisition from Silas Knox. Since then, I've survived a coordinated smear campaign, a physical assault inside my office, and an arson attack on private property. I have 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie, who were nearly killed." Her voice didn't shake. "I'm recording this not out of fear, but because I refuse to stay silent while a man with money and power tries to burn down everything decent people build. I believe in truth, in justice, and in the law. She glanced at Ethan. And I believe in people who still know how to protect it. She released the button. Silence followed, deep and respectful. Elliot's voice returned, this time firmer. That was perfect. I'll get this in front of the judge by noon. The moment she signs the order, Silas Knox is going to feel a noose tighten around everything he thought was untouchable. Ethan nodded. We'll hold position here until you give the green light. Copy. I'll call in a secure team. Be ready. Then the line went dead. Tessa set the mic down slowly. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but release. Emma looked up from the blanket in the corner. Mom, are we safe now? Tessa crossed the room, knelt beside her daughters, and pulled them close. Not yet, baby, she whispered. But we're fighting back. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Samantha found canned goods in a broken supply bin, beans, Peach's crackers. Ethan cleaned a rain barrel to refill their bottles. The girls played quietly in the back room, their voices muffled but alive. Tessa watched Ethan as he secured the perimeter tripwire alerts, improvised motion sensors, using foil and fishing line. His movements were efficient, exact. Every motion told a story. When he returned, he found her standing at the window, arms crossed, watching the trees. You still believe in the system, he asked. Tessa didn't turn. I believe in people who refuse to give up on it. Ethan walked over, leaned beside her. You were brave in there. I wasn't brave, she said. I was angry. He looked at her. Sometimes that's the same thing. She turned to face him. We're not the same people we were 3 days ago. No, he agreed. We're more dangerous now. That made her smile. Good. Outside, a hawk screamed in the distance. Ethan's hand drifted to the comm unit again just to check the signal. Still live. Still waiting. And somewhere out there, Silas Knox was waking up to the first crack in his empire. But here in the middle of nowhere, 5 people held a line made of sweat, stubbornness, and something else. The quiet power of doing what's right. Even when no one is watching. The wind shifted just before noon. It came in sharp from the east, carrying with it the scent of exhaust heat. And something else. Trouble. Ethan stood on the roof of the outpost, one knee braced against the railing, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The tree line to the south was moving not with wind, but with shadows that crept in formation. Slow, methodical, predatory. 3 black SUVs appeared like ink bleeding into the forest. He tapped his earpiece, twice the quiet signal they'd agreed on. Inside the outpost, Tessa tensed, immediately stepping toward the comms desk. Samantha froze mid-bite, spoon halfway to her mouth. The twins, sensing the change in air, grew still. Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker. They're here. No panic. Just truth. Tessa moved fast. She knelt beside her daughters, eyes level, voice calm. Okay, girls, remember what we practiced. Emma nodded. Stay low. Stay quiet. Sophie clutched her mother's hand. What about the bad men? They're not getting past us, Tessa said firmly. You're safe. Samantha took the twins by the hands and led them to the crawlspace beneath the floorboards. It was cramped, dark, and lined with musty wool blankets, but it was secure. Tessa watched them disappear, then turned toward the window just in time to see the first of Silas's men step into the clearing. 10 of them. Tactical gear. No insignia. Not cops. Not federal agents. Mercenaries. A voice boomed through a bullhorn. Ethan Stone. We know who you are, and we know about your daughter. Tessa flinched. They know about Samantha. Ethan climbed down from the roof, slipped through the back entrance, and joined her at the window. He was carrying the old hunting rifle bolt action single shot, but his grip made it look like a weapon of war. "They're bluffing," he said. If they really knew where she came from, they wouldn't be shouting. Outside, the bullhorn screamed again. "You've got one chance. Step out. Leave the women. Leave the girls. You walk away, we forget the whole thing." Tessa scoffed. "They think you'll abandon us?" Ethan's voice was like stone. "They don't know me." He turned and opened a false wall behind the pantry, inside a tunnel entrance, narrow and dirt-packed. "Take the girls through the tunnel. It leads to a dry creek bed. Follow it north. I'll create a distraction." Tessa grabbed his arm. "You're not staying behind." "I'm not dying here," Ethan said. "I'm stalling." She stared at him, eyes searching. "Promise me." "I promise." Their eyes held a beat longer than necessary. Then she nodded. Ethan opened the floor hatch and called softly. "Sam." Samantha emerged, dirt-smudged and calm. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You remember the northern ridge?" "Yes." "Lead your sisters. Don't stop, not for anything. You hear gunfire, keep going." Samantha nodded, once took the flashlight, and disappeared down the tunnel. Tessa followed, holding Emma and Sophie close. Ethan closed the hatch behind them. Alone now, he moved through the outpost with the precision of a man preparing his last chessboard. He rigged a tripwire at the front entrance, using fishing line and tin cans. Smashed glass under the windows. Set the backup generator to overload if triggered. Then he grabbed his rifle and climbed to the roof one final time. The clearing was silent. The men below advanced in formation, 3 at the front, 2 flanking the rest, fanning out. Ethan raised the scope, found the lead man's knee and fired. Crack. The man dropped, instantly screaming. Confusion rippled through the group. They fired back, but blindly Ethan had already shifted position, crawling across the rooftop, silent as smoke. From below, the bullhorn roared again. "That was a mistake, soldier. You just signed their death warrant." Ethan smirked. He'd signed their evacuation. A flashbang detonated inside the outpost as one of the mercs breached the front door. It triggered the overloaded generator. Boom! The side of the outpost exploded in flame and debris. Screams. Chaos. Ethan used the distraction to roll off the back roof, landing hard but clean, and bolted for the forest. He ran parallel to the creek bed, not to escape, but to circle wide, to draw them away. He fired again this time, into a tree trunk beside a flanker, making it seem like he was deeper into the woods. More shouting. North perimeter move. They chased phantoms. Meanwhile, beneath the forest floor, Tessa led her daughters through the narrow tunnel. Samantha kept the flashlight, low eyes locked forward. They emerged at the dry creek bed, just as the explosion echoed. Sophie cried out. Tessa scooped her up and kept moving. They ran. They didn't stop. And neither did Ethan. He led Silas's men in circles, always one step ahead, always one breath from exposure. Until the last of them had cleared the outpost. Until the children were safe. Only then did he vanish into the woods like a ghost. An hour later, under the canopy of dusk, the group reunited on the far ridge. Tessa rushed forward when she saw him emerge, bleeding from a shallow cut on his brow, limping slightly, but alive. "You're late," she said, voice breaking. Ethan gave her a crooked grin. Traffic. The girls clung to him. Samantha looked up. "Did you get them?" Ethan ruffled her hair. "I got enough." Behind them, the outpost still smoked on the horizon, but ahead down the path and into the valley was something else. Police lights, red and blue. Waiting. Elliot's extraction had come through. Tessa gripped Ethan's hand. He looked down at her at the girls beside them and knew this wasn't the end. But it was the first moment in a long time he believed they might survive it. Together, the forest was fading into light. Dawn crept slowly across the treetops, turning black silhouettes into golden branches. Mist floated low over the ground, like memory, and the air was laced with that peculiar silence that comes just before something ends or begins again. Ethan carried Emma in his arms. She was burning up again. Her head rested against his chest, her breaths short and shallow. Her small hand clutched the collar of his jacket even in sleep, like she knew the only thing holding her to this world was the man who refused to let her go. Behind them, Tessa moved fast, keeping pace, despite the uneven terrain Sophie wrapped tightly in her arms. Samantha led the way up the final incline, her flashlight, long since dead, now replaced by instinct and grit. Below the ridge in the clearing beyond the trees, the first lights appeared red and blue, flashing like hope in motion. Elliot had come through, a convoy of sheriff's deputies, 2 medical vans, and a black SUV idled in the distance. Uniforms moved between the vehicles. Radios crackled. No weapons drawn yet. This wasn't a raid. It was a rescue. But they weren't there yet, and Emma's breath was growing thinner. Ethan stumbled slightly. Tessa rushed to his side. "Let me carry her." He shook his head. "I've got her." "You're limping." "I've carried worse." She didn't argue again. They pushed forward each step, a declaration of intent, a refusal to collapse. Ethan's mind was racing not with panic, but calculation. Vitals, distance, wind direction, time. He shifted Emma's weight slightly, keeping her upright, her airway clear. He whispered into her hair. "You're gonna be okay, little one. You just hold on." Her head stirred slightly. "Are we almost safe?" He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Almost, kiddo. Just a little farther." Samantha paused at the top of the ridge, motioned them forward. Ethan and Tessa climbed the last few feet together. And then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, they saw it. Safety. Officers waved them down, hands up, non-threatening. Elliot was already running toward them, suit wrinkled tie, askew face lit with relief. "My God," he breathed. "You made it." Ethan collapsed to his knees, still cradling Emma. "She needs oxygen. Now." Paramedics rushed forward, unzipped their kits, placed a mask over Emma's mouth. One of them took her pulse, checked her oxygen saturation, and gave a thumbs up. "She's stable," the medic said. "But we need to move." Tessa knelt beside her daughter, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "I'm right here, baby. We made it." "We made it." Emma blinked slowly, eyes clearer now. Sophie threw her arms around Ethan's leg. "You didn't let her die." He looked down at her, placed a hand on her head. "No," he whispered. "I never will." Minutes blurred. Tessa signed protective custody affidavits, while officers cordoned off the area. Samantha stayed beside the twins, holding their hands tightly. A deputy gave them each a warm blanket and a packet of crackers. Elliot handed Ethan a burner phone and a file folder. "We've got the court order," he said. "Silas Knox is being brought in for questioning within the hour. Your footage. The radio called Tessa's statement they all held up." Ethan opened the folder and stared at the signed affidavit. The seal of the U.S. District Court sat at the bottom. Real. Weighty. Final. "And the girls?" Ethan asked. "They're under full federal protection. Tessa's being transferred to a secure facility. Witness protection is an option." Ethan looked at Tessa, who was now walking back toward them, the firelight from the sunrise casting gold across her ash-dusted hair. She stopped in front of him. "We have options now," she said. He nodded. "That's good." She tilted her head, searching his face. "What about you?" He looked out at the tree line. "I've got a house to rebuild, a kid to raise, a few ghosts to bury." A pause. "You could come with us," she said gently. "The girls adore you. And I'm not sure I remember how to breathe without looking over my shoulder." He offered a faint smile. I'm not built for courtrooms and protected addresses. I'm not asking for that, she replied. I'm just asking if you'll stay close. For them, for me. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, the answer came easy. I'll stay, he said. They stood there for a long moment, worn, battered, changed, watching the sun rise together over a world that suddenly seemed worth believing in again. Then a voice called out. Stone, one of the officers, held up a small silver pendant, scorched, but intact. We found this in the wreckage. Belongs to you. Ethan took it. Turned it over in his palm. It was a dog tag, not his own. His wife's. He closed his hand around it and nodded. Yeah, he said. She would have liked today. Later, as the convoy pulled away, Emma opened her eyes in the back of the ambulance and reached for Ethan's hand. Do you think heroes get tired? He looked at her eyes, soft. All the time. She smiled. But you didn't stop. He shook his head. That's not what dads do. She squeezed his hand. Then I'm gonna grow up to be like you. He chuckled, wiping his eyes. That's a dangerous thing to say, kid. But you saved us. No, he whispered. You saved me. The ambulance rolled down the road, carrying them away from the forest, from fire, from fear, and toward a dawn that for once didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. 1 month later. The courthouse steps in downtown Everett were washed in autumn light, amber sun pouring through golden leaves, casting soft shadows across the white stone pillars. Reporters had already packed up. The verdict was old news. The cameras had moved on to the next scandal. But justice, when it comes, quietly often settles deeper. Silas Knox had been indicted on 8 counts, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, corporate sabotage, unlawful surveillance, and federal witness intimidation among them. His empire was unraveling. Associates turned state's evidence. Offshore accounts were frozen. His name no longer inspired fear, only infamy. Tessa Hart watched it all from a distance. She sat on a wooden bench in Everett City Park across the street, her heels kicked off bare feet buried in the grass. Sophie lay on a picnic blanket drawing birds. Emma sat beside her, chewing the end of a pencil, deep in thought. Samantha was helping both girls with spelling. Their giggles floated through the air like leaves. A new sound joined them, footsteps on gravel, steady and familiar. Tessa didn't look up right away. She didn't have to. Ethan approached with a cardboard tray in hand, 3 hot chocolates, 1 black coffee. He handed her the coffee and dropped into the bench beside her with a sigh. You're late, she teased. He gestured toward the pastry bag in his other hand. I come bearing bribes. Forgiven, she said, taking a sip. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children. Emma had gained back the weight she lost. Her cheeks were full of color now, and her laugh came easily again. Sophie was still quiet, but she clung to Samantha as though the older girl were a tether to something safe. In many ways, she was. Emma said she wants to be a nurse. Tessa said, her voice soft. Ethan smiled. She's got the hands for it. Steady. Tessa glanced sideways at him. And Samantha wants to teach. Said she wants to build a school in the woods where no one ever has to run. Ethan chuckled. Sounds about right. They watched for another beat. Then Tessa said, You could have disappeared. No one would have blamed you. I thought about it, Ethan admitted. More than once. So why are you still here? He turned to look at her fully. Because sometimes, he said, you don't walk away from the people who remind you who you really are. Her eyes met his, tired but clear. Steady. I'm not the same woman who walked into that tower 2 months ago, she said. I know, he replied. You're stronger now. I used to think being strong meant doing everything alone. It doesn't. She looked down at her hands. No rings, no pretense, just a woman who'd fought through fire and was still standing. "I've decided," she said, "to step down as CEO." Ethan blinked. "Really?" Tessa nodded. "I want to build something else, something quieter. Maybe a foundation resources for single parents, veteran families, people off the grid." He raised an eyebrow. "The Everhart Foundation." She smiled. "You remembered." He nudged her shoulder. "I listen." They sat together, warmth pooling between them as the sun tilted westward. "Think anyone would donate to a cause started by the woman who took down Silas Knox?" she asked, half joking. "I think," Ethan said, "that woman could raise the dead if she wanted." She laughed, really laughed, and the sound cracked something open in the air between them. Then Sophie ran up with a drawing in hand. "Look," she said proudly. "It's all of us." Tessa took the paper and smiled. A stick figure version of Ethan stood beside her, a little too tall, and with hair that stood straight up. The three girls were holding hands between them beneath a giant yellow sun, and the words, "We are safe," now scribbled across the top in pink crayon. Ethan looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Later that afternoon, the five of them stood outside the small one-story house on the edge of town. The roof was new, the porch freshly painted. A wind chime hung from the eaves, catching the breeze with a soft metallic whisper. Samantha turned to him. "You sure you don't want to keep the cabin?" He shook his head. "Too many ghosts. But this place." He looked at Tessa, then at the girls. This could be home. They entered together. Inside, the walls smelled faintly of fresh lumber and cinnamon. Boxes were still unpacked. The living room was bare, except for a couch and a bookshelf waiting for stories. Tessa walked to the window and pulled open the curtain. "Sunlight," she said. "First thing I wanted. Good choice." Sophie climbed onto the couch and bounced twice. "Can we paint our names on the wall?" Ethan grinned. "It's your house, too." Emma ran to the kitchen. There's a window above the sink, just like at the cabin. Samantha stood beside Ethan and looked up at him. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. He looked down at her. His daughter. His anchor, and felt something shift inside. Not guilt. Not weight. But peace. "I didn't do it alone," he said. That evening, as dusk poured its soft blue into every corner of the house, the five of them sat together on the porch. No sirens, no cameras, no shadows, just wind in the grass. Tessa leaned into Ethan's side, resting her head on his shoulder. He slipped an arm around her and held her there, steady, quiet, present. The children played in the yard, fireflies beginning to spark in the grass. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "about what you told me that first night, about cleaning the world quietly." Ethan smiled. "Still believe in that, more than ever," she said. She looked up at him. "Ethan," she reached for his hand. "Don't disappear." He looked at her. Not the CEO, not the survivor, not the mother, but the woman who had seen him not just for what he'd done, but for what he was becoming. "I won't," he said. The sun slipped below the horizon, and in the soft glow of evening, love didn't explode like a firework. It settled in, like light through the trees. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October, and the park was dressed in gold. Leaves floated lazily through the air, twirling like notes in a silent melody. The grass was scattered with orange, red, and brown, and the sky was a soft watercolor of cloud and light. The kind of afternoon that didn't ask for attention, just quiet appreciation. Beneath a large oak tree near the pond, a picnic blanket was laid out. Tessa sat on one side, warm in a cardigan and jeans, a thermos of tea in her hand. Her boots were off. Her bare feet wrinkled the edges of the blanket. Emma and Sophie chased each other nearby, arms full of leaves. Their laughter rose and fell in waves. Samantha leaned against the tree trunk with a book in her lap, half reading. half watching them with a protective ease that no longer came from trauma, but from love. And Ethan Stone sat in the grass a little farther back, whittling a piece of cedar. The wood curled in clean strips beneath his pocket knife. He didn't rush. He never did. His fingers worked, slowly shaping something not for defense, not for survival, but for beauty. It had been 3 weeks since they moved into the new house. The town had embraced them. Word had spread of bravery, of justice, of the quiet man who saved 3 lives and never asked for thanks. But no reporters had come, no flashbulbs. The world for once respected their silence. Dad, Samantha said suddenly, "You didn't forget, did you?" Ethan looked up, brow raised. "Forget what?" She grinned. "You promised." He smirked, reached into his jacket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was the wooden carving, finished, sanded smooth, and painted with care. It was a small eagle, wings outstretched, carrying 3 stars in its talons. Samantha gasped. "It's beautiful. It's for you," he said. A reminder of what he met her eyes, that even when you feel small, you carry people. She wrapped her arms around him, and for a long time neither moved. Tessa smiled from the blanket, heart full in the most unexpected way. A month ago, she hadn't known if her daughters would live to see the end of the week. Now they danced in the sunlight like they'd never known danger. Ethan sat down beside her a moment later. She handed him a cup of tea. They sipped in silence. "I heard from Elliot," she said eventually. "The Everhart Foundation has its 501c3 approval." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" He called in a few favors. Ethan chuckled. "You two are dangerous together." Tessa shrugged, a sly smile playing on her lips. "We've learned from the best." They looked out at the girls again. Emma had climbed into the crook of the tree and was pretending to be a bird. Sophie danced in circles beneath her, tossing leaves like confetti. Their joy was unburdened. That was the real miracle. You ever think Tessa asked that maybe all of this happened so we'd find each other? Ethan looked at her, not as a protector, now, or a shadow from a past life, but as a man who'd spent a lifetime fighting to keep others safe, and finally found something worth staying still for. "I used to think life was about surviving," he said quietly. "But now I think it's about protecting what survives inside you after everything falls apart." Tessa reached for his hand. "What survives in you?" He looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, his answer didn't come with pain. Hope. The afternoon faded into evening. The wind cooled. The sun dropped low. Emma returned to the blanket and curled up beside her mother. Sophie crawled into Ethan's lap without a word, clutching a stuffed rabbit he'd repaired with fishing line and thread. Samantha finished her chapter, then stretched with a yawn. As they sat in the soft hush of twilight, Emma looked up at her mom. "Can we play the quiet game again?" Tessa smiled gently. "No, honey. We can speak now. We're safe." She looked at Ethan when she said it, and he nodded once, slow, certain, steady. The moment held. Then, from somewhere in the distance, the faint melody of wind chimes carried on the breeze, gentle, high, and full of grace. The camera, if there were one, would begin to pull back. We'd see them sitting beneath the oak, bathed in amber light, wrapped in laughter, silence, and everything in between. And then a voice. Faceless. Familiar. Steady. The voice of the narrator we've come to love. Some heroes don't wear medals. Some don't wear uniforms. Some don't ask for thanks. They don't shout. They don't chase glory. They just clean up the world quietly. One heart at a time. Fade to black. Roll credits. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story for more quiet tales of courage, love, and healing. We share stories like this every week, crafted to lift spirits and remind us of the good that still exists. From all of us here, thank you for spending time with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love.